kind of just hanging out, hence the couch. And I feel like it's very weird if I'm trying to have a conversation with you and you don't actually know me. So we're gonna be friends in the next 30 seconds because I'm gonna tell you all kinds of weird things about me. Dark chocolate is superior to everything else. I don't eat breakfast in the morning because I'm not hungry. I could eat Mexican food every day of the week, also probably Chinese food. I'm usually in 2 sports leagues at once, if not more than that. I am a sun goddess, that's why I'm tan. I'm from Pennsylvania originally. Debbie thought it was
not Italian.
I'm not Italian. I'm actually German and Welsh. Debbie thought it was relevant to tell you that I have a boyfriend since we're talking about boys. And my claim to fame, my highest achievement in life, is that I lived in Debbie's basement 2 summers ago. And I was the worship leader for Beloved, so it's been a hot second since I've been around, but I'm back. And
who of you guys remember Sarah? Yeah, see?
Okay,
you know a lot of them.
That's it. Wow, Hannah, okay. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Those are some good, solid facts, and now we're friends, and we're gonna talk about boys, and it's gonna be great. So why are we talking about boys? There's a lot of reasons why we're talking about boys, because they're kind of a prevalent part of our existence as women, because they are the counterpart to us. But in discussions that we've had and discussions that we've had with Debbie, it's important for us to have a conversation about this, because I think it's really common that we stick things in boxes in our mind, and we separate them out from the rest of our lives. And a lot of the times, as Christian Catholic women, boys, dating, talking to boys, thinking about boys is kind of one of those things that we stick in a box because we're just not entirely sure how to integrate that into the rest of our life. So we're gonna take that little box and dump it out, and we're all gonna talk about it collectively. Because the reality is that even if you stick it in a box and you think that you're not having a conversation about it, if you're not talking about it openly with your friends or a mentor or your family members, you really are having a conversation about it. And that conversation is happening with the culture that you live in. Instagram is telling you how to interact with boys, how to view boys. Your Facebook feed is telling you the same thing. Snapchat, movies you're watching, music you're listening to. You're having a conversation about what your relationship to boys looks like and what dating looks like, whether you recognize it or not. And so instead of having that conversation, we're gonna have it now with people that you trust, that love you, and that know you well. And that's kind of the platform for what we're operating off of. So this isn't a talk, we're not speaking at you. Elizabeth and I are not experts on boys or dating or any of those things. We're 2 people that are still trying to figure that out, but we just happen to be a little bit older than you, so we get to sit on the couch and say things into a microphone. Yeah. But before we kind of get into some points that we thought were good discussion topics, what is this conversation not? You know, the lawyer in me needs to make some legal disclaimers about what we're not talking about. This is not a chastity talk, but it's also not a chastity talk, if that makes sense. But that's not the specific goal, I guess, of this. It's not an instructional lesson on how to obtain a boyfriend. It's not an explanation of the male species and how they work, act, otherwise think, which is probably a good thing for all of you because I don't understand that still. It's also not a recommendation of whether you should or should not be dating, because we're not the authority on that. And if anyone has any issues with that, please see me. We will have a very lawyerly conversation about that. Anyhow, so if no one has any issues, then we're going to get into our conversation and some things that we thought were worthwhile to talk about.
And I realized that not everybody knows me either. I'm Elizabeth Muise, and I guess I need to tell you some random facts about me. I'm going to be really random. I love classical art memes so much with a strong passion. I think they're my baby. I named the trees in my backyard. It is true. I love dancing. Like, you can catch me dancing at any time. My main saint is St. Catherine of Siena. She is my ultimate girl. And I love art. And there's a lot more to me. So get to know me. Come up to me, and I would love to talk. But those are some random facts. So, and I can tell you my tree names later. Real Ann Arbor right here. Okay. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about, and this is like a huge thing to tackle, so I'm not even going to like this in and of itself could be a talk. So I'm just gonna briefly touch on it. And again, this is just a conversation, and we will continue this for the rest of our lives. But I really want to bring up the to date or not to date question, which is really hard. It's really, really hard. Because I think, while I was like, I've dated a lot. I've been on a lot of dates with guys and in and out of relationships, and I think Sarah and I both have. And one thing that I've like really come to the conclusion is that no one is ever 100% ready to date. Nobody is. And you can be 30 years old and you still won't be ready to date perfectly. Because we're all broken, we are all human, we all make mistakes, we're all hurting. And men are they're different from us. There are a lot of things that are similar because obviously we come from the same God, but they're different from us. And each guy that you're gonna date is going to be different. They're gonna bring something different to the relationship, and they're gonna bring their own wounds and their own baggage. And so I guess I just wanna put that out there, okay? There's no like, when you are at this state, you are ready to date, okay? Because even when you think that, once you get into that relationship, it can be really, really hard because you've had wounds that you've been acting out of that you didn't know were there until you were in it. So I just want to put that out there. I also really, guys, want to stress right now, there is value in being single. There is value in dating. There is value in marriage. They're all good in their own way and in different stages, and you're really supposed to live it out to its fullest, no matter what stage you are in, okay? And so I guess what I just want to get onto though is like, give you maybe some things to consider. And one thing, the number one thing is, you guys are high schoolers, most of you, there's some young adults in the crowds. If your parents have a rule about dating, you need to obey them. And I'm gonna put that out there, okay? Because that is huge, and it's hard. And when I was in high school, that was really hard for me because I was definitely boy crazy in many ways. But I wasn't allowed to date in high school, and I'm speaking from my own experience. So I'm not saying that nobody should date in high school, but I'm speaking from my own experience here. The rule in our house was you weren't allowed to date till you were 18, till you were an adult and made your own decisions. Not fully completely, obviously, because I was still under their roof, but I now, being my age, can look back for me personally. Again, each person is so different, and I want to affirm you if you are dating and you have a healthy relationship, that's great. That's wonderful. Continue on that healthy relationship, but I just wanted to let you guys know that that rule, now looking back on it, I am so grateful for that rule. That's one of the rules that my parents had in our house that I'm like the most grateful for, because I'm a very emotion-driven person. And that would have been really hard for me to date when I was in high school. Obedience to your parents is really hard, but I'm just gonna quote real quick before I move on to my next point. This is a quote from St. John of the Cross that really it got me. He said, "God is more pleased to behold the lowest degree of obedience for his sake than all other good works which you can possibly offer to him." So I just wanna put that out there, okay? You should not be dating if your parents have a rule about it. And you have to obey that, okay? All right, second though, we're gonna move on from that. The thing you really need to consider is whether or not you know your identity. And I know we talk about identity so much that it can be like in one ear and out the other, but guys, if you don't have your identity in Christ and in God, you are gonna lose it in the next guy you date, and it's gonna be crushing. It just is. Because it's just it's gonna go with him, and then as soon as it ends, then you don't know who you are, or what you're doing on this earth, or whatever it is. So identity in God, make sure, self-check that, and really pray about that, and start now placing your identity in God. Have you fallen in love with the lover, with the one who made you? Have you fallen in love with him yet? Don't consider falling in love with a human being until you've fallen in love with him. I think the second thing is, if you start liking a boy, okay, and you're allowed to date within your home, are you pursuing this for your own pleasure and social status? Or are you pursuing the relationship because you genuinely care for him and want to get to know him? And feel, in a sense, not just feel, but like you become more of yourself and growing with that person. And I think that's really important to consider. But there are a lot more points that I could make, but those are just the few that I think are really important when you're considering whether to date or not. I'm gonna pass it on.
The next thing that we're going to talk about is talking to boys. It's kind of the next logical step once you've figured out, do I want to date or not date? And so then you start talking to a fine fellow. And how do you go about talking to boys? I kind of want to start with the principle of women have this desire to be seen and to be known. I think we can all agree upon that. It's this interior state that we just want to be seen and to be known for who we are. And that really goes back to the Garden of Eden. Before the fall, before original sin, they were seen and known by God for who they truly were. And then Eve took the apple and that kind of went downhill. So that's been distorted now. And a lot of times I think it's really easy for us to take that desire to be seen and known, and instead of looking towards God and being seen and known by Him, we look for that in the opposite sex, in the attention of a guy. Let me tell you some stories about high school Sarah. High school Sarah talked to a lot of boys. High school Sarah mostly talked to boys because she was looking for her identity and her worth and the attention that were coming from guys. And that's a really hard truth for me to admit, even now, as an adult that's been out of high school for a while, but I was 100% at certain times seeking out guys, almost desperately so, because I didn't know my worth without them paying attention to me, without them complimenting me and validating me in my existence as a woman, and that's not okay. That's not why you should be talking to guys. And so you need to know yourself first. It goes back to identity. I know we harp on that, and it's very cliched in this word that's very loaded, but it's so true, is that first and foremost, you need to be seen and to be known by God. You need to stand before Him, have His gaze on you, and know who you are as a woman of the Lord before you're talking to a guy. That's the platform. That is the solid foundation, but we're not perfect. I mean, we're gonna slip up on that, even if you are striving in your faith life. There's gonna be times that sometimes it just feels nice to be flirted with, and it's validating to you as a woman, and I'm not perfect in that even still, so that's okay. You can make a mistake in this area. I'm not saying that you're going to be 100% great at it all the time. And I think really the thing that I want to nail home with this is that your worth and your identity as a woman is not defined by the attention of a guy. Amen. Yes. That you need to know that, you need to believe it, and that's whether you're talking to a guy, the attention that he's paying to you does not define your worth and your identity. If a guy is not talking to you, your worth and your identity is not defined by that either. That has nothing to do with guys. And so that's one thing that you remember that I'm saying. Please let it be that. But so that's the key mindset. And then this too is when you are in a conversation with a guy, this is the question that you should be, or not the question you should be asking yourself actually, is it shouldn't be, who am I as I'm talking to this guy? Who am I before him? The question should be, who am I before the Lord? Because this mindset, if you're always asking, who am I as a woman of God, that's going to change the whole tone of your conversation. Because a girl that is talking to a guy that doesn't know who she is before the Lord, she's going to accept disrespectful treatment from a guy because she's looking for her worth and identity in that. She's going to compromise on what she knows is right and wrong, and that can come in a variety of different capacities because her worth and identity is coming from the attention of a guy. She's trying to keep him around. And you're probably going to end up doing things that are not in line with your Christian beliefs because you don't know who you are before God. But if you know your worth and identity and you're firm in that, and you're a strong, independent woman who is empowered by the truth of the gospel, you're not going to accept disrespectful treatment. You're going to demand to be respected. And you're not going to compromise on your morals. And then I think this isn't a point that I included in the original one, but I see this a lot. If your worth is tied up in talking to a guy and he ghosts you, or whatever the trendy phrasing is on that, where he stops talking to you these days, you're going to be in a state of despair. I've seen this happen with a lot of my friends where guys don't respond to them and they're in this state of despair because their worth was tied up in that conversation more than they realize. But if you know who you are in the Lord and you get ghosted, yeah, it's gonna stink. You're gonna be upset about it, but you're not going to be in this deep level of despair because you know and trust that the Lord has something better planned for you. So that mindset is what changes the whole conversation with guys. Is when you know who you are as a woman of the Lord, then talking to them is entirely different.
Yeah, so I guess the next thing that I want to touch on is practice like you play. So the end game, or the end goal, I guess is a big one. And I think, so I'm looking around the room and some of you are dating and some of you have not even considered dating. Some of you are terrified of boys and others are boy crazy. So, there's a wide variety of people out there. But I think something we can all do and start now is cultivating who we want to be in our relationship or just in life in general. Start it now. And this is like a really, really kind of funny example, and it's kind of even going past the dating stage, but I remember when I was younger, I was like confessing this to Emily, actually really driving to Grand Rapids the other day, and I was like, I really wanted to be like one of those cool fit moms someday, and I was like, I'm gonna be the mom that's like, going on a run with their kids in the stroller, and then I was like, what am I kidding? I don't even run now. Like, so why am I gonna be doing that when I have kids, when it's even harder? And the same goes for relationships. It's like, if you want to have a pure relationship, you need to start being pure now. If you want to have a life-giving relationship or a holy relationship or whatever, you start now in your singlehood to strive for holiness, to strive in character. And all those things that you want eventually in your relationship, you start it now. But I think what I really ultimately, and I know any of you who knows me knows that I love talking about heaven, because guys, our end goal is not getting a boyfriend, it's not being romanced, it's not having a marriage with 6 little kids that follow behind you, which is so cute, but that's not the end. That's not what we should be looking for. That's not our goal. We should be looking for it, but it's not our goal in life. Our goal is heaven. Okay, ultimately it's holiness, it is heaven. That's what we're striving for. If your eyes aren't on heaven, then you're not living. Okay? So that is the end goal, okay guys? So ultimately, our relationships, if your relationship is not getting you to heaven, if it's not helping you grow in holiness, and we're all going to make mistakes, okay? So I'm not saying that it has to be absolutely perfect. But if you're not growing, then you're starting to die, ultimately. Because in life, you're either taking steps forward or you're taking steps backwards. And so, really, within our relationships, if right now, if you guys do a heart check, if you're dating right now, I really, really want you, as scary as it is, to take into consideration, is my boyfriend and I, are we growing in goodness, in truth, in beauty, in character, in strength, in dignity, and that's even like in freedom? Is he helping me become more free, or am I enslaved to my passions, to my emotions? And I think one thing that I really want you guys to do, and this is something I try to practice in my own life, is the choices that you make now and the actions that you act on now, so your actions now, 4 years down the road, are you gonna look back and are you gonna regret them? Or are you gonna be proud of them? Because when we're in, especially when we like boys, guys, it's exciting. God gave us attraction and emotions, and yeah, that's great. We're female. There's nothing wrong with you if you're super attracted to a guy or if you have those feelings. But you have to do those self-checks. You have to have the will with it, okay? And look to the future and say, okay, how I act on this, am I gonna be proud of myself down the road, or am I going to regret it? Or is it gonna cause me wounds or hurt or pain? And oftentimes you don't even cause those wounds and hurt or pain. So I also don't want you to fear that as well. Yeah, but I guess I just want to emphasize that anything you want out of your relationship, you really should start working on now in yourself. Any guy you want, if you want a good, holy guy, then you should become a good, holy girl. Okay? All right?
I'm going to add to that briefly. Going back to the marriage, the relationship that isn't the end goal. It's holiness in heaven is the end goal. And I think a concrete example in my own life, which we kind of discussed when we were brainstorming ideas, is that when I was in college, I went to Franciscan. It's a great school. It's a very Catholic school. And I watched a lot of people that I was graduating with getting engaged and getting married shortly after college. And I didn't. I went to law school because I prayed, and that's what I felt called to. And it was very challenging for me to watch. It was good, and it was joyful, and it was beautiful, but it was also hard because I was doing something that was very different. And even throughout law school, a lot of my friends got married, they started having kids, and I was still in school for 7 straight years, and that was very hard. If marriage was my end goal, I wouldn't be a lawyer. Think about that in your own life. If that was my end goal, and holiness and my vocation and my calling was not, then I would not have gone to law school, I would have found someone to marry, and I would have kids. And that's great, and that's beautiful for people that is the path that they're on, but for me, my path was to go on to be a lawyer. And so that's why it's so critical that you're always orienting your gaze and you're always striving in the direction of heaven, because that's the most important thing. Something to marinate in your brains. Last topic, sisterhood, friends, girlfriends, tribe of people, whatever you want to call them. I think sometimes when we think about dating, we think of us and our significant other, and that's it. You're in this little powwow together, and then your friends are kind of this separate thing. I think maybe we've all seen friends that have started dating and they kind of disappear off the face of the earth and are encapsulated in a relationship, or maybe you've even done that yourself. I know that there have been times where I've dated and it's become this isolated experience that's different, but really your friends are so critical in your dating life. I once went to a talk when I was in Austria and I was studying abroad. A couple of the moms gave a talk about dating and marriage, and one of the quotes that stuck with me, this was when I was a junior in college, so it was a few years ago at this point, she said, "The stronger your girlfriends are, the stronger your marriage is." And that hit me like a sack of bricks, because in my mind, you go into marriage and it's you and your spouse and that's it. It's just the two of you, you're tag teaming everything. But she said, no. The fact that I have really solid girlfriends has made my marriage so much better, because we need those people. We need people that are speaking truth into our lives, that know us well, and they refine us in a way that a significant other can't. There are ways that we grow in holiness and who we are as women by our friendships with other women that we can't get from men. They're different than us. And that's even the person that you're dating or your spouse. It's just not the same. So characteristics that you're looking for in these friends. Obviously, if you're sitting in this room, you probably have some pretty solid friends. Beloved is bursting at the seams with awesome women. And this is kind of a no-brainer, but number one characteristic, their goal for you is heaven. You have friends that they're setting their sights on heaven and they're running the journey with you. So that's number one. 2, you become friends and then you cultivate a judgment-free zone. It's like Planet Fitness, where it is open and honest communication, and you are probably entirely weird around each other, and you know what friendships I'm talking about, right? You have those people where you just are wild and free, and it's great. And because of that, because you have these people that want heaven for you, you've cultivated this space that is judgment-free, open and honest communication, they're going to speak truth into your life. And they are so concerned with bringing truth into your life that they're gonna tell it to you without fear. They're going to be courageous, and they're going to be more concerned about you reaching heaven than the fact that you might get pissed at them for something that they say. Those are the type of friends that I'm talking about. And this isn't going to be a large group of women. It's not gonna be like probably 20 women. For me, there's like 5 people that I would consider this to be my group of people that I have this kind of environment with. And so these are the people that when you're feeling maybe unworthy because guys aren't talking to you, or you're not dating, or you have been single for a couple of years or your whole entire life, they're gonna say, no, that has no bearing on your worth and identity. You are an awesome human being, and they're gonna tell you that. Or if you start dating someone and it turns out that they're kind of a jerk, they're gonna tell you that. They're gonna call you out on that. But then on the opposite side of that, when you start dating someone that's awesome, they're gonna tell you that too. And they're gonna be like, wow, he's a catch. You should probably keep him around. So they're going to tell you the truth no matter what it is because they know you well and they want heaven for you. And so they're concerned about speaking truth into your life. But here's the kicker with this, is that, great, you get those friends, and this is probably the more challenging part. You have to be receptive to that. You have to be willing to receive the truth that's being spoken to you, which I think is so much harder than finding those women. Especially if you're involved in this community, it's easy to find those women whose goal for you is heaven, who are gonna speak truth to you, but dang, to put yourself in a position to receive that is hard. And I can speak from experience. A couple years ago, dating someone wasn't so great. I didn't wanna hear it. I had friends that were willing to speak truth to me and tell me that, but I didn't wanna hear it. I wasn't receptive to them speaking that into my life. So I encourage you to find those friends, have the humility to receive that, and be that kind of friend. You want to strive to be that kind of woman in the lives of other women. It's a small group of people, and then also with this, find mentors. That's a whole different thing. It's great to have a group of your peers. That's wonderful, but there's such value to mentors, to people that have a little more life experience than you, because they can see things that you can't. And I mean, that's coming from, when I look back at things in high school, from high school to college, there was so much that I learned. From college to being out of college, there was so much that I learned. I always make sure to have people that are a few years older than me also speaking advice into my life, because it's so valuable to hear it from them. And more often than not, they're the ones that are going to tell you the really tough things, because they are seasoned with life experience. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I actually have a few things to add. I think one thing is whether this, okay, so I think one thing is, like, it's super important obviously to have mentors. It's really important to have those close friends, but it's also really important to have people that you trust in a more, like, in a smaller, more intimate circle, and not be telling every single person about it. Because then you're just gonna get confused, you're gonna be hurt, you're gonna get mixed messages. And so I think it's so important to open up and be vulnerable and ask for advice, but just with, like, the ones that you trust. Does that make sense? So then it also doesn't turn into gossip too, because they can be so easy to turn into gossip as well. And that, and I guess I just wanted to share, just be vulnerable with you guys about kind of a mistake in this area that I think when we were talking about this, a mistake that I made that was really hard for me. And just kind of like last year, I dated someone for about a year and a couple months, and we were talking about engagement in December, and then things started really spiraling. And what did? I isolated myself in this relationship. I didn't open up to my friends. I didn't open up to, like, Debbie. Debbie knew something was going on, and I just was like, no, don't want to talk about it, don't want to talk about it, because that was the easy thing to do, is to keep it all in. I didn't want her to judge me, I didn't want them to judge me, and so I isolated myself, and I became miserable. And there was something, I knew that I needed to start opening up. And once I kind of got over that, and I was able to bring it into the light, I realized just a lot of unhealthy things about it, and I think I feared that. And so I not only brought it to Debbie, who helped me, who's been a mentor of mine, and she pretty much told me to take him off the altar because he was the center of my life. And this was just this past December, guys. So when we say that we're not pros at this, I mean it. We've made plenty of mistakes. And then one of my best friends, the day I kind of initiated this, like, the breakup with the guy, the next day we sat for 4 hours, and she hammered me with questions. She was a good enough friend to, like, ask me question after question and then listen to me and let me process. And that's what I needed. And so it took me over a year of dating this person to realize that I needed these strong women in my life to have a healthy relationship. Or to see that it was an unhealthy relationship. So I guess that's just all I wanted to add to that.
One last point, going off of that. I find that if I am doing something, or if I'm having an experience where I don't want to tell my best friends, and I kind of deep down feel shady about it, it's probably shady. And by probably, I mean that it's 100% been shady every time that's happened. So I think that's a thing to realize, especially when you're getting into the world of dating, and it's a gray area when you start, and even as you keep going, every situation is different. And you're starting to feel shady about stuff and you're not telling, probably something that you should also pray about, but that's generally a good indicator that it is shady, like I said. Not to use the word shady about 20 times, but just emphasizing the point, but it is shady.
Definitely. Yeah, okay, so guys, that's all we have for you right now. We're gonna be doing a panel later, which we're super excited about. But again, like, those of you who aren't allowed to date in high school, I was in your spot, totally understand that. Those who aren't interested in boys, great, but eventually you will be running into all of this. And so it's always good to be prepared in a sense, even though you can't be fully prepared. So I just also wanted to clarify that. And then we did have some funny dating stories, if you guys want to hear them. Sarah doesn't want to share, but I'm going to share mine. Okay, this is really funny. Okay, so, well, maybe it's not that funny, but I think it is. Okay, so I was going on a date with this one guy who shared different faith than I did, and we were going on dates. He was a super passionate guy, just like, you know, chemistry right off the bat. Like, we were both in a wedding together. I was a maid of honor, he was a groomsman, and like, so it sounded like really cute, you know, we're dancing together, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, so much chemistry. So the more we started to hang out with each other, the more I just realized there were so many differences, especially when it came to our faith. And our faith turned into, like, from discussion into argument. So I knew I needed to end it. And we're going on a walk, and I was just about to bring up the fact that I needed to end this relationship with him, and he looked at me and he's like, so, and I'm Catholic, and so he looked at me and he's like, so I can't marry a Catholic, ever. And I looked at him and I was like, okay, fine, I was going to end this anyways, like, you know what you want, like, sort of thing. He panicked, and he got down on one knee, and he grabbed my hand, and he went, but our love will carry us through. It looked like he was proposing to me, because people were walking by like, oh, and I'm standing there like, and I literally pulled my hand away, and I was like, what love? Like, this is ridiculous. So, yeah, that ended quickly. So yes, it was fun.
Mine's not nearly as funny as Elizabeth's, but it's high school. So I'll give you my first date ever story. I was a sophomore in high school. I was the last date in high school. He was a super nice guy, and we didn't have cars and couldn't drive, so my mom dropped me off at his house, and his parents had a finished basement with like a foosball table in it and big screen TV. So we go to the basement. He's sweating already. It was also his first date, so like, he's sweating, and he's not super chatty, and so I'm like nervous chatty, and we played foosball for a little bit, and then he's like, oh, do you want to watch a movie? And I was like, classic. This is everything I've seen on TV. And I was like, sure, that's fine. And so the way that their basement was set up is that the TV was kind of in this corner, and then there was one couch and two in this corner. And so then he's fiddling with the DVD player, and so I'm looking at these couches, and I'm like, where do I go? Where do I sit? And so then I just sat on one of the couches. I think I was kind of in the middle. It was the one against this wall. So he gets the DVD to work. He stands up. He's still sweating. And at this point, like, this look of panic goes on his face. And in my mind, which I don't think was an irrational thought, I was like, hey, we'll sit next to each other on the couch. You know, that seems like how this should work. No. He sat on the other couch on the furthest end away from me. And so we sat on two couches the whole movie away from each other as far as we could. It was super awkward. And so then I went to a small Catholic high school. There were like 75 people in my graduating class. I made a mistake of telling one of my friends about that. Well, it wasn't a mistake. I was mortified. We were on two couches. So I told someone who then told someone who told someone, because that's how high school works, it's a domino effect. And this poor guy, he was on the football team, and so the football guys found out about it, and so with the rest of high school, his nickname was Two Couch. So, oops, and then we were still friends throughout college, and then we saw some of them. We actually dated again in college, but that's a side story for a different time. But then we saw each other again, and he was still called Two Couch, so.
You're coining nicknames. going to now take a break, and you guys can get snacks. And then we're going to come back here, and we have some questions that we're going to answer. So thanks, guys. Wait, that makes so much sense. Wow. Okay, very fun fact.
Oh, that was, American Eagle has a big sale right now on long skirts, $10.
So now you know where her mind is at and where her heart is. No, I'm joking. Totally joking. All right, so we're gonna go on to answering some of the questions. So I'm sorry if you guys aren't on Instagram, but those who are on Instagram, we actually put up a little like question, box, whatever it's called, whatever the official term is. And you guys submitted actually like 12 questions, so good job, it's fantastic. So we're gonna try to do our best to answer these. And the reason why we have, especially Grace and Mary joining us is because Mary is closer to you guys' age. So she just graduated from high school, and so I think she's more relatable in that way. And Grace has such a beautiful, romantic heart. And I think sometimes, Sarah and I were saying this, we can be a little bit harsh sometimes. So I think it's really good to bring on a very beautiful, romantic, feminine soul, heart, person, woman. So yeah, there we go. Alrighty, so let's start out. I'm actually gonna pass it to you, Sarah. Number 2, you wanna read it out loud?
What is a good way to get to know a boy before you start dating? Before I answer that, great question, because I cannot emphasize enough that you should be somewhat friends before you start dating. I have dated multiple times where I didn't really know the person, and that was kind of a disaster. It might work out for you, I'm not saying that it can't, but I'm just saying in my own personal life experience, being friends first works. I think group things are a good way to kind of ease into that, and that's good. You can see how they interact with friends. My current boyfriend, we played volleyball together before we started dating, so we did a team sport, so that was a pretty good way to get to know each other. I don't know. Don't like go to the movies though, or something where you can't talk. So do something that's conversation oriented, but I think having something to do, even if you're just going bowling as friends or playing mini golf, or like, I think activities tend to be good because then you're distracted by doing something and people kind of open up a little bit more if they're just not like standing there and like have to have a conversation, so you can kind of talk about what you're doing and stuff like that. And then, maybe after that you could get coffee once you know each other a little bit better. I don't know if you drink coffee, but something along those lines. But things in a public setting that are super low key or group things. So I think those are the options I think work well.
Another question is, how do you begin the conversation on setting boundaries with a guy? My only really advice is to just be very blunt, and you have to be very clear with what you mean. So if you're like, I'm not having sex before marriage, you might have to be a little more clear like what that entails. And like personal experience, I'm always like randomly driving with a guy I've gone on a couple dates with, not like couple dates. And then like really randomly in conversation, I'll be like, oh, by the way, and then I'll set my boundary. That like works for me because it kind of catches everyone off guard. So it keeps it genuine, but at the end of it, I always kind of put like a little disclaimer that's like, if that doesn't work for you, that's okay. This can end, but if like it doesn't work for you, then like I'm gonna leave. But I think you have to put that like, if it doesn't work for you, leave, because otherwise I think that there's a lot of miscommunication where they think that that's something that can be like talked about as you like get closer emotionally. So just, you have to be, I would say, very blunt and just like say, God, give me courage. And if he respects you or is someone who's supposed to be in your life, then the conversation will go accordingly. And if he's not, then you'll get a pretty hard no to it. So either way.
Hi ladies. So, one of these was, my crush told me he likes me, but I feel he's uninterested. What do I do? So, this really hurts my heart because I had a similar experience. Whoever you are, you're not alone. And so there's a couple like factors here. First of all, this sounds like a guy, I don't know exactly what you mean by it seems like he's uninterested, but this sounds like a guy who's saying one thing and doing another thing. And so basically he's lying. And that, if you feel like you can talk to him about it, like if he'll respond well, you should just like talk to him about it and be like, so what does this mean? Like, what does it mean that you say that you like me too? Like, what's gonna happen now? And just like, when I went through this, I was so emotionally attached to this person that I didn't really realize that he wasn't treating me well. Like, if a guy is lying to you, he's not treating you well. And so I was really struggling with this, like, what can I do? What can I say? How can I fix this? And it took somebody that I knew, like Elizabeth and Sarah were saying, someone speaking truth into your life. It took somebody that I knew to say, this guy doesn't seem like he deserves you. So if you need somebody to say that to you, I will say it to you now. You deserve to be pursued. You deserve a guy who will show that he cares about you, not somebody who will say one thing and do another thing. I think that was it.
See, aren't they amazing? I'm so glad we brought them on the panel. Yours is amazing too. No worries. Sorry. No, it was wonderful. Okay, so next question. How do you make sure your relationship with your boyfriend is centered on God, or God as the center? And I'm going to attempt to answer this. God will not be the center of your relationship if God is not the center of your life and not the center of his life. So I think it is super important that you, again, start now with making God the center of your life, and also making sure that he has his own personal relationship with God, and he's pursuing that. And not just, oh, he's so holy because I saw him in the chapel the other day. Oh my goodness, like that's not the only, that's not like, okay, it's clearly gonna be centered on God because he brings me to adoration. But if he's acting in a different way, then obviously God isn't the center in all things. Also, learn to be super open about your spiritual life together. Talk about God together and how you are growing and progressing in that. If you're afraid to even bring up what's going on spiritually, then your relationship isn't centered on God. But I think it's also really important to point out that you don't always have to be talking about God, though, too. You can also have fun and have other conversations as well, okay? But yeah, and learn to pray together. Learn to pray individually. And learn to just be able to have conversations about it openly and vulnerably with each other. I think those are my 3 points.
This question killed me when I read it, and that's part of why I took it, and it killed me in the stab in the heart. Kind of like, why don't boys like me? I'm not going to ask everyone in here to raise their hands and actually show this, but I'm pretty sure that probably all of us have asked that question at one point or another. Why don't boys like me? Why aren't guys talking to me? Or maybe why is this particular guy talking to me and not a different one? This is the constant struggle of being a woman. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We have this desire to be seen and to be known by men, which I think it is healthy. It has been distorted to some extent by original sin, but it's healthy. And man, I don't have an answer to this as in let me give you some concrete, practical answers of why boys don't like you, but I can tell you this, that there have been many days in my life where I've sat there and asked myself the same question. It's something that comes and goes, and really it's a way that Satan gets at women. It is a way that he isolates us, and he thinks that we're the only one that is asking that question. We are the only one that guys aren't paying attention to. And he traps us in that because he knows that gets to us. And it sucks. There's no way around it. And you know what? I don't want to say it's a part of life, but it is. And that goes back to, you tell your friends about that. I've had many conversations with my friends where I'm like, man, I feel like crap. I feel like guys aren't paying attention to me. They're not talking to me. And my friends are like, no, you are great. You are awesome. You're a God-fearing woman. And they will speak truth to that lie. But if you let it sit inside of you and you sit there by yourself, Satan's going to kill you in that isolation. So I guess really my only answer to that is you're not alone. We've all thought it. We all think it. It's a lie that we battle. But again, your worth and your identity is not based on a guy's attention to you at the end of the day. And that's the truth that you combat that lie with. Well, this is so cliche, but we're going to do it. We're going to do one of those group repeating the things. But, okay, are you ready? Yeah. Repeat after me. My worth and my identity is not based off of a guy's attention. Amen?
Amen. This question says, why do a lot of boys only care about looks? I think that the actual words used in this question are the answer. They're boys, and they're not men yet, clearly, because someone who focuses on the outside is really not getting to know the inside. Also, beauty is subjective, so, like, why do they only care about looks? Like, everyone's gonna be attracted to a different thing. So again, like she was saying, I would say for this question, if you're with someone who seems like they're only caring about what's on the outside, then you need to just move on, because a real man will affirm what God tells you, which is you are made in his image and likeness. There's no one like you. And looks is kind of a block way to say it. You're so much more than looks. So that question is just, you need to separate yourself from someone who makes you feel like you are just looks. And if you see a lot of boys caring about that, then that just means they're boys and they're not men yet, and maybe you shouldn't be looking at them. Yeah, that's it.
So this question is, when is a good age to date? And we heard a lot about this already from Elizabeth and Sarah too, about the to date or not to date. So just kind of quick recap and some other things that I was thinking. Your parents know you really well. So if you're really wondering, am I ready to date? You could ask them. They probably have a good idea of your maturity. Because the thing is, it's not about how old you are necessarily, it's more about how mature you are. So there are definitely some younger people who are ready to date when there are older people who aren't ready to date. But like Elizabeth said, you're never completely ready to date. So figure it out. One good thing to consider if you're considering am I old enough to date, is how well do you know yourself? How much can you be honest with yourself? This kind of ties into the identity stuff that they were talking about before. If you can't be honest with yourself about maybe your motives for dating this person, or about how emotionally attached you are to them, or things like that, if you can't look at yourself and say oh, that's wrong, I need to fix that, then you won't be ready, you won't be able to date them well. You'll be dating them with yourself in mind, not really realizing it, because your motives will be wrong. Hold on, I'm gonna check my notes, because I feel like there's something else I said. You need to also honestly answer the question, is this good for me? So that's another question that you need to be mature enough to answer well before you're old enough to date. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh yeah, well, personal experience. I told myself I wasn't gonna date in high school. I was like, no, that's a terrible idea. And then right around senior year of high school, I ended up starting to date my first, only, and current boyfriend, which was actually a really good thing for me. It was one of those things where I realized oh my gosh, this is good for me. So, even if things can change, even if you thought you weren't ready. So yeah, that was me. Anyway, that's it. Too many papers.
Okay. So, this is kind of a hard question to answer. I often feel like guys are so immature, and I've heard it's because they don't really mature until later. Is that true? Actually, scientifically, it is true. Their brain takes longer to develop. I'm not joking. I should have looked up the stats, but it's actually true. Women's brains mature faster than boys' brains or men's brains. But I don't want to just generalize and clump all boys and men into the same category as like, boys are always so immature. Because I've met some high schoolers that are very mature for their age, that are more mature than guys my age. And I've met guys my age that are more mature than the 30-year-old. And so, yes, boys can be very immature, especially around your age. I think unfortunately our society allows them to stay immature longer because they're not demanding of them, I think, what society demanded of them before. As in like having to get a job, getting married, raising a family, going off to war, whatever it was. I don't think they're demanding of you. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, now I have guy friends that I've looked in the eyes and I'm like, you are acting like you're 16 still. No offense to 16-year-olds, you guys are great. But when you're 24, you shouldn't be acting like a 16-year-old. And so the thing is that, yes, I think guys take longer to mature, but again, not all guys, so I can't overgeneralize that. But I also think that if you see an immaturity in a guy, even if he's giving you the feelings and you want to act on it, don't enter into that relationship, okay? If you see it in him, don't enter into it. You should be really pursuing a relationship with a guy who has your best interests at heart, and he himself is growing in character and maturity and all that. So yeah.
How far is too far? Yeah. Now we're getting spicy. Now this is going to become a chastity talk. Wow, what a heavy question. This is rough to answer. The definitive, I will say this: sex outside of the sacrament of marriage is what we believe. That is truth. We know that, so that's a no-go. But then, as Mary was saying, let's unpack that. What does that mean, though? It's hard to figure this out. It's something that over the years I've grown and I've grappled with in different relationships. So I can kind of tell you some general experiences that I've had. Is that it's not wrong to be physically affectionate with someone that you're dating. I think that that's good and that's healthy to an extent because we do have physical compatibility in dating. But when you get to the point where, really, you kind of cross this line where it's good and it's healthy and you need that, and then you start getting into the area where you're really just doing it for pleasure, and you're getting aroused off of that, and that's kind of where you cross into the line of we probably shouldn't be doing this, because then you're just on the slippery slope to diving into areas that are really just leading you to sex. And that's not a clear-cut black and white answer, and I don't have one for you. It is a gray area, but you know when you start feeling that, and I guys, the way that they're wired, for them, it's a lot quicker, and so it's sometimes harder for us as women to get to that point and to realize that we're crossing into an area that we probably should not be in, physical affection-wise. So, pro tip, have a conversation. We've talked about this of setting boundaries, and that's something that you need to talk about ahead of time, is setting clear boundaries with who you're dating, and it's just point blank a conversation that you need to have. I've had experiences where I was dating and we didn't have a conversation about that, and then we ended up crossing lines, and I knew based on how I felt that it was a line that should not have been crossed, versus when I've dated and we've had a conversation about that and you're both being accountable to it. Because if you're depending on yourself to make a decision in the moment about not doing something when it starts to feel funky, for lack of a better word, you're not going to, because you're going to be tripped up in your hormones, and you're going to be seeking after pleasure, and your brain stops functioning in a logical way when that happens. And so you cannot rely on making a decision in the moment about how far is too far. And something too is, chastity it's a tag team sport. It's something that both of you are striving after, and that's why it's important to have a conversation. So you both know what you're oriented to. You both have set the boundaries, the goals that you're striving for, and so you both are making that decision in the moment. Those are kind of just some general principles on this question. It's a very loaded question. If you want to have a conversation about that, please talk to me. That's something that we can talk out. It could be a lengthy conversation probably when I'm not sitting on a panel on a couch.
Grace and I are going to tag team. What do you think about guys and girls being friends during high school? Is it good or bad? Sure. The first thing that came to my mind is for the boys versus like being like friends with boys. And that's something that I think is really important, where a lot of my like girlfriends, when you're like for the boys, you become like part of the conversations that just are really like, one, not interesting, and two, like not good for your soul or mind or like intelligence. And where if you're friends with boys, they're just human beings. You get to love them as brothers. Guys are fun, so are girls. I feel like when you say like, what do you think about them being friends? I think everyone should be friends. But I think that once you get into like being one of the boys where they feel comfortable to talk about stuff, like, I don't know, I think that you have to like make sure that you're keeping a clear line that you're a girl and you like command respect so that you don't have to demand it. Because when you like have to demand respect from your guy friends, you've already kind of like lost it. Where if you command it, they know that there's certain things that they can't talk about around you or shouldn't say around you, and they want to respect you enough to not bring it up because they know it would make you like not okay.
Yes, Mary, so true. And the other thing I was thinking about is how valuable it is to learn how to be friends with guys and not like want their attention or affirmation, but just like to enjoy being their friend and to like love them as a sister, and almost like not to seek their admiration. Like even if it's a guy you're not interested in and you're just friends with him, not to like approach situations with him like, oh, I hope he thinks I'm cute right now, or like things like that, like just to keep it very like about his good and your good, like just being good friends, enjoying each other's personalities, and like learning more about how to interact with guys, because guys are very, very, very different from us. And so it's really fun and interesting having guy friends who like can compliment you well without any like emotional entanglements. Do be careful, because when I had a lot of really good guy friends in high school, but sometimes I would like spend too much time with them one-on-one, or like have really intense emotional conversations with them. And normally that was just because like I cared about them so much. But if you start becoming really vulnerable with guys one-on-one, even if you think like, oh, we're just friends, it can send really mixed messages. So guy friends, really good. Complicated, emotional, sticky guy friendships are not so good. That's what I have to say.
Okay, so we are kind of running behind, so we are going to go on to praise and worship. But I think one thing I want to point out that so I know we have some girls that are homeschooled here or in a little more sheltered homes. I was one of them growing up. And I just want to point out, guys, that it's really important for us to be having this conversation, because, guys, boys are really great. Not in the way of like romantic relationships, but just as human beings. And I think we oftentimes don't talk about that enough. We think about it more as like, oh, boys are over here and ooh, they're this and that, or you're afraid of them, or they're only a romantic interest, or whatever. Like, they're human beings, and they're also journeying on this earth towards heaven and towards a relationship with God. And I just want to point that out, because I think I definitely being in high school, yes, was boy crazy, but also had this like forbidden, like, ooh, boys, like, you know, bad word, boyfriend. It's kind of true. So I just wanted to point that out because I'm coming from a place that I'm sure a lot of, I don't know, maybe I'm just, putting thoughts into you guys' heads. But just wanted to make that clear. So we're now going to praise and worship. So if the worship team can come up now.